Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. This time, we're going back to cover the infamous Battlebowl. It's Starrcade 1991, the Lethal Lottery. Kyush, what is it that has made this gimmick so infamous in the minds of wrestling fans?
There's just something about it that sticks in your mind, isn't there? Like, I had never seen this show before. I knew very, very little before we started this podcast about this particular era of WCW and NWA history. But somehow the Battle Bowl is just something that lives on. It transcends this era and even this company. The Battle Bowl is a special moment in wrestling where a man sat in a room and came up with the batshitest idea that's somehow awesome and horrible at the same time, and then did it.
Yeah, what I'll say is, I don't think this is really that bad an idea. I mean, if we make a list of like Dusty Rhodes' worst ideas, this is way better than the Chamber of Horrors.
Oh God, yeah. This is actually a fantastic idea. The problem is it's not a great idea for 1991 WCW.
No, I mean, I think the blind draw tag team is a good idea, and I'm sure that had been done before. That sounds like a Bill Watts thing. Like,
Sure.
I'm sure there had been territories where they had done this. The idea that we're going to randomly draw tag teams and all sorts of interesting things can happen from that. But for some reason, this has just lived on as an example of like how just terrible, terrible early 90s WCW was. I mean, I would say I don't like that they did this for Starrcade, but by 91, it's just become a thing that Starrcade is a gimmick show. Like 89, they did the round robin tournaments. 90, they did the tag team tournament. It had just sort of become ingrained, I think, that Starrcade was now a gimmick show, and this was, a big Dusty Rhodes idea. The blind. So we should explain the rules of the Battle Bowl, I guess. In this case, 40 wrestlers were entered, which I think we're already seeing an issue with the concept because they are not 40 deep on this roster.
Yeah, they aren't 25 deep on this roster. Like, if you did this in WWE now, it wouldn't be a problem because you got 100 guys just sitting around. But this is way too many people.
Yeah, 1998 WCW easily could have done this.
Yeah, but this is not, no. Like, there are people that we're going to mention that are in this match who have no business being on pay-per-view, much less Starrcade.
Yeah. So you randomly draw 20 tag teams from that. You have 10 tag team matches, and the winners of the tag team matches are entered into a 2-ring battle royal at the end of the night, and the last man standing from the 2-ring battle royal wins the Battle Bowl ring.
Yeah, like them football players, they got the Super Bowl, baby. And then we'll have the Battle Bowl ring, so when we're going to strip clubs in Florida, they can't flaunt their rings at us anymore.
Yes. Dusty Rhodes is a huge sports fan. He loved rings. I've always felt like there should be more like trophies and like medals and stuff in wrestling. Like I believe like, oh, you won the main event of WrestleMania, you get a trophy or a medal, or you won the Royal Rumble, there could be a trophy for that. But a ring is not very cool.
Yeah, not to be the guy who brings up Japanese wrestling all the time, but that's the trope there, is that anytime you win any significant tournament of any sort, you win a gigantic trophy bigger than your whole body.
Yeah.
And it's cool. It looks cool.
An unfortunate decline of trophies in wrestling. We still got the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal trophy, but
didn't the Mae Young Classic have a trophy?
I think they did. Didn't I think the NXT tag tournament in tribute to Dusty, the Dusty Tag Team Tournament had a gigantic trophy, if I'm remembering right.
Should have been rings. He would have preferred rings.
Yeah, that would have been the real tribute to the man.
They win 2 Infinity Gauntlets.
So I guess, one thing we mentioned first off, it's been a very tumultuous year for WCW, if nothing else evidenced by the fact that Dusty Rhodes is back booking the promotion. That's a big change.
If you had offered me good money at that time, I never would have guessed he ever would have been invited back to do that.
Yeah, would have thought he was banned for life after the way he went down at the end of '88, but 1991, Vince McMahon just got tired of him, thought he was too fat and ugly to be on his TV, fired him, and WCW brought him in to book. He's not an on-screen talent. He'll make the odd appearance, in the next couple of years, but not a full-time wrestler. He's just the guy booking, but he's overseen by the infamous Jim Herd. This will be the final Starrcade for Jim Herd for reasons that will become obvious during the course of this show. But the most notable development, even bigger than Dusty being back, is Ric Flair is no longer a part of WCW. The man who defined WCW for years before this, the man who not only appeared on every Starrcade to this point, but main evented every single Starrcade to this point, is now gone. And this company is entirely lacking in a direction without him.
Now, it must be said that at the very least, despite the fact that their top guy by a mile has been taken away, Sting has finally emerged from that shadow. And like, if you were watching the product at this point, like, you would believe, like, all right, even though we've lost Flair, Sting is ready to take on that burden. Like, he's ready to be a top guy. So maybe you can survive without Flair. Like, maybe it sucks that you got shoved into the new generation like this, but like, maybe it's time. Maybe you're ready. Unfortunately, Flair is not the last guy they're going to lose in like a 6-month period.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered Flair's departure pretty in depth on our Great American Bash 1991 episode, but broad strokes, Flair wins back the title at the beginning of 1991, just weeks after the Black Scorpion debacle. He wins the belt at a house show in the Meadowlands in January 91. They bring back Dusty to book, so they've brokered some kind of peace agreement between Flair and Dusty, time heals all wounds or whatever.
Yep.
Business doesn't pop with Flair as champion the way they're hoping it does. It doesn't really get worse, but it just kind of stays the same as it did. Flair is not going to fix everything. Like, it's not a cure-all. Ric Flair will draw you about as much as you can is the reason they kept going back to him. But by 1991, like, Ric Flair being the world champion for the millionth time is not going to set the world on fire.
Especially when you haven't really constructed any new or interesting people for him to be fighting. Like, and the truth is, it's kind of time for Sting. Like, even if Flair hadn't been about to leave, and even if all of this stuff doesn't go on, the push for Sting to be the new guy had already been happening, and it's time to move on to, like, kind of pass the torch that way. And I kind of feel like this whole Flair leaving and coming back thing kind of, like, holds him back in, like, a really weird way. Because he has no one to fight, and so he seems like he's a failure as the top guy. Then Flair comes back in and just yanks the spot away from him, and like he's just kind of in limbo throughout the whole 90s.
It's tough because they already crowned him as the guy,
Yeah.
and now Flair's won the belt back from him. It just feels like he should have dropped it to. They don't have anybody else for him to lose it to, but it does just feel like him losing the belt back to Flair undermines him. It's like if Steve Austin had lost the belt back to Shawn Michaels after WrestleMania 14, or Hogan had dropped it back to the Iron Sheik. It just doesn't feel right in some way.
It's one of those statement things. It's like, yeah, Sting's the star of the new generation, except he'll always not be quite as big a star as Ric Flair, and it really just cements that in people's minds. Like, if Sting had just like ripped off like a 2-year title reign, even if it had been bad television, even if it hadn't drawn per se, I think that really would have set him up in the minds of people the way he needed to be in order for it to like sustain itself.
The way WWE just kept the belt on John Cena forever, and people hated it, but it was the right way. It was the right thing to do.
Yeah, and people resisted it and they hated it, but then after a couple years, you realize that you had like a Cena-shaped hole in your head where the champion goes. And that's what it is. Like, eventually people will buy what you sell them, even if they don't want it at first.
So Herd decides Flair is too old. They get into a contract dispute. I heard the estimate from Dave Meltzer that Flair was asking for a $375,000 a year guarantee, which even in 1991 WCW doesn't sound like that much money.
It's really not that much money, you guys.
But Herd wouldn't do it. Herd thinks that's too much. He wants Flair to drop the title, which Flair is willing to do, but he is using the title as leverage to try to get a new contract. Flair is supposed to drop the belt to Lex Luger at the Great American Bash. with negotiations breaking down, Hurd wants Flair to instead lose the title to Barry Windham on TV, which is just a way of burying Flair. Like,
Yes.
we're going to have you get beat in front of 2 million people on TBS. No, not how wrestling works at this point.
It's funny the parallels between this whole situation and like the Montreal Screwjob situation.
Yeah.
Where like it's like if Brett had been like, you know what, fuck you, Vince, I'm just bailing. Bye.
Yeah, I mean that's what it comes down to is like Flair is not going to lose the belt on TV to Barry Windham, and Hurd, fires him. We've covered that Great American Bash. It's one of the all-time disasters in wrestling history.
Holy shit, yes. The Lex Luger versus Barry Windham. Who's the heel? I don't know. The fans hate them both.
Yeah, Luger wins the belt after turning heel on Windham at the Bash. So they have Luger as a heel managed by Harley Race. I mean, it's not the worst idea, but they don't have anything set up for him. I mean, Luger's first title defense at Halloween Havoc is against Ron Simmons, who has a ton of potential, but is like not ready to be in a main event world championship match in 1991.
Oh, absolutely not. Like, not even particularly close, if we're being honest. And like, he could have eventually gotten there. And again, that winds up handicapping him because it's way too soon.
So the other problem is Luger is also on his way out of the company. He is about to leave for the World Bodybuilding Federation, where he is going to be, I think, initially a commentator. I think he did commentary on the first WBF pay-per-view. He's going to do commentary at first, and then I think the long-term plan was that he would end up being one of the bodybuilders, and then probably there would be some crossover with the wrestling, you would have to think.
Yeah. I like how you said, like, I think he was a commentator, like you don't know that one of the two of us watched that pay-per-view live.
So I'm surprised that isn't on the WWE Network.
I'm so glad it's not.
Otherwise, I would make us do that. I have to check to see if that's on YouTube.
It's just weird gay porn, man. It's just all it is.
Pretty sweet deal for Luger, though, that, like, he's not going to... I mean, I'm sure it was a nice salary, and all he has to do is train and bodybuild. He doesn't have to wrestle.
And that's the thing, too, is that it's... What the idea is that Luger's on steroids, right?
Oh, yeah.
And this is when Vince is under some heat about steroids. So wasn't this just basically a way to keep Luger off the books for WWF while he's on steroids?
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Same trick they pulled with Brock and like Triple H and people being considered part-timers were exempt from the drug policy.
Yeah, they're independent contractors. They don't really work here.
Yeah. So yeah, they're gonna have to replace Luger too. So the belt is gonna go back to Sting, and they're gonna have to go in a different direction. Now, they're fortunate as they've got a new monster coming in. They've got Vader joining the company full time here after making the odd appearance before this. He's coming in from Japan with a big reputation. He's the man who destroyed Antonio Inoki, and he's the reigning IWGP Heavyweight Champion.
He's a god. Like, there's no other way to put it. Basically, from the first days that there is an IWGP Championship, it revolves around Vader. Vader was Antonio Inoki's vision of a perfect pro wrestler. A guy no one would ever want to fuck with in their right goddamn mind. Yes. He jobbed out Inoki in 30 seconds and caused a riot because people didn't think that was possible.
Yeah, like just beats Inoki with the nastiest German suplex you have ever seen.
You may have seen it in GIF form because it's floated around the internet for a long time where he just spikes him on the top of his head with the German suplex and pins him.
I love that booking so much. I adore that.
It's important that you guys know that the fans were so not even outraged, but just like set on fire by that literally they tried to burn the building down. These are Japanese fans.
I was going to say, the Japanese people don't seem like the rioting type. Like,
That's how
different
big
places
that
have
was.
different places have reputations. Southern United States riots. Oh yeah, Mexico definitely. Puerto Rico, hell yeah. Japan, not a place you think of when you think of rioting. Fans seem
So
very polite and respectful there.
it is. It very much is. So when I tell you that happened, I need you to understand how serious that was and how big of a heel Vader was. Vader is, without question, the biggest, most perfectly constructed monster heel possibly in the history of wrestling to this point. And he is being hand delivered here as the perfect opponent for plucky babyface Fire
Yeah.
Sting. Like it's you couldn't dream it up better than that. That's a 10-year feud.
Yeah. Now, what should happen is Vader should come in and murder Sting and everyone he loves and hold the belt for, I don't know, a year. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I say you take a year to get there. Vader murders the whole roster one by one, finally gets to Sting, murders him, murders Sting on all the rematches, and then Sting
Main,
has
ev-
to like
main event
remake
of
himself.
Starrcade 92, Vader wins the belt. Main event
Yeah,
of Starrcade 93, Sting wins the rematch.
boom. And then you could do like two more Starcades with them fighting again.
Yeah.
That would never get old.
This is not what happens. We will get into
No.
what actually happens next week.
The
Um,
idea of Vader is never what actually happens.
So one more interesting note is this show takes place just days before the January 4th, 1992 Tokyo Dome show, which is the WCW New Japan Super Show 1992, Super Show 2. So we should note that everybody here is going to jump on a plane and fly to Japan basically right after this show is over to do this awesome and epic show. Let's read off some of the matches on this card.
Yeah, how bad would you like to watch some of these matches as he lists them? Just think about it.
Sting and the Great Muta defeated the Steiner brothers in the main event.
Fuck yes, pump it into my veins.
Riki Choshu defeated Tatsumi Fujinami.
Which is basically like their Okada versus Tanahashi for that era. Like that, those were the two guys.
Lex Luger beat Masachono.
I mean, WCW fans. Well, I guess the horrible Masachono had not happened yet. Like with Rick Rude, that hadn't happened yet, right? Doesn't that come later in like '93?
I think that's in 90. I think that's the year after this.
Okay, so they wouldn't think that he was the worst wrestler who ever walked the face of the earth.
Big Van Vader fought El Gigante to a double disqualification.
Vader versus Gigante.
Yeah, that is actually something I would like. I mean, how much the New Japan fans have been freaking out when they saw that on the card.
Holy shit.
Vader's gonna fight a guy who's 7'7".
And then,
Shinya Hashimoto versus Bill Kazmaier.
yep, as two spherical shaped entities.
Dusty and Dustin Rhodes versus Masa Saito and Kim Duck.
I feel like this is the last time Dusty wrestles for like ages.
He's in a War Games in '93, but he is winding down here. It's probably one of his last matches ever in Japan.
And he doesn't team with Dustin very often. Like, this is a very unique match.
Yeah. Various other matches on this card, too.
Yeah. It's just, these, like the first one, Rumble in the Rising Sun, and this one are just such unique, fascinating shows. It's really the only time two companies of this stature literally run side by side, like, let's put all our best talent on a show and just go for it.
I would love to track down some of the WWF All Japan shows from the late 80s. Those look fascinating every time I look at the cards.
Like Bret Hart versus Mitsuharu Misawa? Yeah, that happened for real.
Japan Hogan, who as we know is the GOAT.
Japan Hogan, there is no comparison. Like Japan Hogan's not even racist. That's how much better Japan Hogan is.
So on this card, we have lots of names that are representative of the problems with WCW at this point. We've got Firebreaker Chip, Mike Graham, Van Hammer, Steve Armstrong, The Night Stalker, PN News, Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker, Arachnaman, Big Josh, El Gigante, Bill Kazmaier. We've got terrible gimmicks. We've got nepotism. We've got wrestlers like pulled straight out of wrestling school and thrown on national TV when they're not ready.
Yeah. I was bringing this up when we were talking before the show started, but the only reason that Kevin Nash and one of his horrible gimmicks isn't on this show is because this is the show that's exactly between Oz and Vinny Vegas.
Yeah, they're in the middle of packaging him for that big run as Vinny Vegas.
Yeah. So like that's where we are. And those are the characters that you kind of associate with this time in WCW. Like, man, what a big flock of jabronis that they're running with, and they have these horrible ideas. Because this era of WCW was a joke. It's a punchline. If you didn't actually love it and grow up watching it, you probably know nothing about it except that it's a punchline. So when we actually talk about some of the redeeming factors here, like it's not as bad as we were made out to think that it was. It's just, but there are a big flock of jabronis.
So here's the real question. What wrestling company is going to be the first one to bring back the Battle Bowl?
Oh my God.
Is it going to be AEW? Is it going to be NXT? Is it going to be MLW? Every other WCW gimmick from this era has been resurrected.
The funny thing about this too is that this is one of those rare dusty gimmicks that I could absolutely see like New Japan do. Just like randomly be like, well, we're just doing a Battle Bowl in the middle of the summer.
Blind draw tag. There's so much you can do with this blind draw tag team concept.
Everyone should do this. Everyone. It's the coolest idea imaginable. The idea that you have no idea what teams you're going to wind up with. You can tell like 40 different stories in one night. Yeah. You can have enemy team with enemy. You can have like main eventer team up with jobber, and like you can have young guys with veterans. You can do anything. Yeah. You can tell every story.
Best friends could get paired on opposite teams and have to fight each other. You could have two guys who it seems like would hate each other end up being a great tag team. You can create like months of storylines from this.
Yes. Like I keep bringing it up to you, but like this has the vague same feeling as the G1 Climax. And the reason I say that is because it's a weird, overly complicated tournament. But what that does is it basically just gives you the runway to create the next 6 months of storylines as everyone interacts with everyone. And that's what you can do with this.
It just opens things up because you can get interactions between so many characters who would never interact with each other.
Yeah. And like obviously this card isn't amazing because it forces you to include like 20 people who you would not want interacting with your big stars. Like you don't necessarily need to include Arachnaman in your major storylines.
No.
But just as like a shortcut to like, this is the first time Vader and Sting ever cross paths and they're tagging or something like that. And Sting is just like, man, look at this big fucking scary bastard. I hope I never have to fight him. Foreshadowing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is the blind draw is the part I like. The rest of it, I don't really love the battle royal at the end of the night. The 2-ring aspect of it, I don't need to see a 2-ring battle royal. I think it would be more interesting if you blind drew the tag teams and then it was an actual tournament. So it would go on for longer. You would get multiple matches out of some of the teams. You could have things evolve a little bit. I think that would be a very interesting concept. As you pointed out before we got on the air, it's like the way they did the mixed match challenge in WWE. That was portrayed as if it was a blind draw.
I just want you to imagine a version of this done today, right? So like you have a special just where you draw the teams, right? And it can almost be like the Mae Young Challenge or whatever, where like they're all the whole roster standing around the ring, and like you call out the names and they have to stand in the ring together. Like you and me are gonna tag team.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Tribal Chief Roman Reigns is gonna have to team with Otis.
And just like the interactions, I would watch that special rabidly just to see how people would interact with each other. It would just be fantastic. Or like two heels get to tag with each other and you're like, wait a minute, did they rig this shit?
Fair.
That's fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah. What if a tag team, like a real tag team, were randomly drawn together, but then they still don't win the tournament? They break up because of it.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
And like if this had been a tournament instead of just a one-night thing, because that sort of happens here. Like Rick Rude and Steve Austin, who are members of the Dangerous Alliance, are one of the teams. So if this were a real tournament, it'd be like, oh, they're a shoo-in. Like they're the only real team.
Favorites. Yeah.
But they're not actually a team, and they don't really see eye to eye, so that causes friction in the stable. Again, you can tell 100 million stories with this.
So to get into the show, it's Sunday, December 29th, 1991, a few days after Christmas. We are at the Scope in Norfolk, Virginia. Crowd of about 9,000 on hand. Pretty good crowd. Not a lot of empty seats that you could see on the broadcast.
I just want to point out that the Norfolk Scope Arena was not 20 minutes away from my house. I was not aware that wrestling existed at this time. I am so mad every time I see a big show at the fucking Norfolk Scope. When DX invaded the Norfolk Scope,
Yeah.
I was not watching wrestling because I was banned from it at the time. All of my friends went to that show. I just want you guys to understand, I never saw a wrestling show at the Norfolk Scope, even though I grew up next to one of the great hotbeds of the South.
And now
Yay
you're just chasing those years you missed.
I missed all of them, Steve.
Yeah. Show does a 0.7 buy rate for about 155,000 buys, down from 165,000 the year before, but I don't know, not that big a drop considering what we're seeing here.
Yeah, it's holding pretty steady.
People bought this show with 0 matches announced in advance. You had no idea what you were going to get.
And I wonder, too, because all I really have to go on is the poster, but they don't tell you who all is going to be in this thing, do they?
I'm sure they promoted, like, I don't know if they would have read off all 40 on the air, but I'm sure they promoted, like, Sting, Lex Luger, Rick Rude, etc., the biggest stars.
Yeah, but that buy rate it's probably like half people who would just buy all the pay-per-views and half, like, curiosity buys. And that's what you're going for. Why not? It's not a bad buy rate. Not for this time.
On commentary, we've got the unusual team of Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone. They do fine, but it's not they don't have a lot of chemistry, and obviously they're both play-by-play guys.
Yeah, Jim Ross has become very, very good. Even from the last year that we did this, he has come an incredibly long way and just like relaxing. I think maybe working with Paul Heyman loosened him up a little bit. I don't know. But like he's become just a much more well-rounded commentator. Tony Schiavone sucks ass on this show. He has literally nothing to say about any of the matches.
He's not a color guy or analyst. Like he's supposed to be. He's there to do play-by-play. Although I think he does a pretty good job as the analyst today for AEW.
Oh yeah, now these two, Tony Schiavone like runs JR out of the arena. He's way better. But here, oh my God.
How great was it to hear Tony Schiavone say, "It's Sting," one more time?
It's Sting! Yeah, we haven't really had a chance to talk about recent events. Hey, Steve, Sting came back. It's really WCW now.
Yeah. We're just getting to relive my childhood as Sting shows up and Tony Schiavone screams in the background.
Just seeing the stars in Steve's eyes as all of these WCW things come back to him after so long is so beautiful, you guys.
It's like things would not be that different if I owned the company.
No, literally, like Steve and Tony Khan would book exactly. If we brought Tony Khan onto our show to do a So You Think You Could Book, it would be the exact same shit as if Steve did it.
Oh, lots of bunkhouse matches. So we cut into the arena. JR and Schiavone welcome us to the show. They explain the rules for the Battlebowl, which obviously takes several minutes because it's ludicrously complicated, and nobody's ever seen one of these before.
Nope.
I hope they did this for the live crowd before the show, so they knew what was going on.
Fortunately, this is one of those rare times where they've smartened up the announcers, because all throughout the night they're explaining it to us, as opposed to future times where Tony Schiavone would be like, "I don't fucking know what the rules are. We'll figure it out later." And then comes the very best part of this entire show. They lift this gigantic curtain. The entire arena is basically cordoned off, and there's this gigantic stage, and all 40 participants are standing on stage together like they're in a beauty pageant. The visual is unbelievable. Yeah, so they throw it to Bischoff and Missy Hyatt. First off, welcome Eric Bischoff to WCW. Also a big development. Missy Hyatt and Magnum TA. They start to draw. I thought they were going to draw all the pairings right here. They should have, right?
Oh, they really should have. Instead, I don't know. I kind of liked the drawing throughout the night part of it.
Okay, we'll talk about that more as like the night continues on, because there's other elements that don't quite work the way that they could have with that. But I also didn't really love like the long drawn out like drawing here, because the live crowd doesn't know what's happening. So like I don't know that it communicates super well. And then
Yeah,
it
I don't
seems
know why they can't have the microphone play over the PA so the crowd can hear what's been drawn.
Yeah, and so the wrestlers, they also there's no entrance music for any wrestler on this show. Like they get drawn, and so they just run out to the ring, and it's just kind of awkward and clunky, right?
Yeah.
Like
Look,
it
if they
doesn't
did
feel
this in
big.
WWE today, they probably wouldn't even announce. It would just be like their music would come. It would be like, well, who's next? And their music would come on, like the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, so like you'd get like one guy down there, and it'd be like Ricky Steamboat in the ring, and then like Cactus Jack's music would hit, and then you get like a direct reaction shot of Ricky Steamboat being like, "What?"
Yeah.
And that's what you need. Like that sells the emotion of it. Here you get no one's reactions to anything.
Yeah. I did love, like you did, all 40 guys being up on the stage looked amazing.
I wish they just left him up there all night.
Yeah,
Like I
how
know,
cool would that have been? It would have been like, again, this is a TNA thing, but that like town hall meeting. Didn't they do this? Was a TNA gimmick, right? Where they had everybody out. There was like a Jim Cornette
yes,
thing. Yeah.
yes.
Or having a company meeting, and then they at some point did a match where it was like the entire company was out there watching it, so we could see the reaction shots.
Yep. But I love the idea of not only like when their names are called, they got to come down and wrestle, but I love the idea of like the winners have to go back and like collapse on stage and
Yeah,
wait for their turn in the Battle Bowl, and then like lug their asses back down to the ring. Or if like at some point like a huge brawl breaks out between like all 20 of the guys who are left, and then the Battle Bowl starts.
so team number one is Michael Hayes and Tracy Smothers, who of course recently passed away. Rest in peace. And team number two, Marcus Bagwell and Jimmy Jam Garvin. So we've got Freebird against Freebird here.
This is one of all the stories that you can tell, tag team partner against tag team partner is probably the most obvious one.
Yeah.
And they do exactly what the fans want here, which is like they want to see Jimmy Jim Garvin wrestle Michael Hayes. We've never seen it. The fans are super pumped to see it, and they do it. And they have just like do some clean wrestling, which neither one of them has ever done before.
Yeah. So the Freebirds were faces at this point, I guess.
I think it's one of those things where they're heels, but they're beloved.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they're still dicks, but
And the way they're playing it is like Hayes and Smothers don't get along, and Smothers is clearly a heel. And Bagwell and Garvin do get along. So I would assume, obviously, Bagwell was a face at this point, and it would seem like Garvin is.
yeah, like Garvin. What I really liked is all through the show, the through line for every match is every wrestler is like, all right, look, whether I like you or not, we got to win this fucking match. I want to go to the Battle Bowl. So like, all right, kid, you're stuck with me. Cool, let's win this match. Like, I appreciate that it's not just like they don't just make it seem like, all right, here's my random tag match. All right, here we go. Like they actually play to that. Like, I'm stuck with you. All right, buddy, let's go win this thing.
Yeah, the story early on, Hayes and Smothers is in the ring, and Smothers gets his ass kicked by both Bagwell and Garvin. Like he's just getting knocked around. Hayes tags in. He gets control of Bagwell, and he tags out to Smothers, and then Bagwell very quickly turns the tide.
Because Smothers sucks.
Yeah, is the story of this match. Is Tracy Smothers is a piece of garbage.
That's his whole career, is that Tracy Smothers talks a big game, but he sucks. Like, that's his character.
Smothers slams Bagwell. He misses an elbow drop. He tags in Garvin. Garvin hits a forearm. Tags out to Bagwell for a crossbody. That only gets two. Bagwell hits Hayes with a cheap shot. Hayes decks him with a left hook. Garvin comes in for Hayes. Hayes hits a right hand. Smothers goes for a moonsault of some sort, kind of just like a crossbody where he kind of spun. He misses. Bagwell hits him with a fisherman suplex for the pin. Was not the greatest opener. I mean, the highlight was when Garvin and Hayes got in there and they just did some chain wrestling for a couple minutes, and the fans gave him a standing ovation.
Yep. I just that was pretty much all. Like there isn't a lot to a lot of these matches, and this one particularly, but it is still kind of fun.
We draw the next pairings. We've got Steve Austin teaming with Rick Rude against Van Hammer and Big Josh. So that's two faces against two heels. Austin and Rude are in the Dangerous Alliance stable together, so that seems like a big advantage for them.
The Dangerous Alliance, which we have mentioned before, is probably the greatest stable ever assembled, and it is an unbelievable shame that it does not get more credit.
I mean, those dudes rolling into a club in 1991 must have been beating women off with sticks.
Or the other way around. Yes, I completely agree. Rick Rude and Steve Austin. Steve Austin is in such a fascinating part of his career.
He looks so weird.
He looks so weird and bad. But like, if I had been doing a Q Scouts of Steve Austin in 1991, it never would have occurred to me that he could be a huge megastar. But I might have seen the potential in him to become the greatest wrestler on the face of the earth. Because he's still raw, but like he has this like kinetic way of moving that he would have when he became a big star too. Yeah. Where just like he's constantly moving.
Yeah, and everything he's added a great character. Whereas here, like, the fuck is he doing in these trunks?
Yeah, it makes no sense.
He's got these like, I don't know, colorful spandex. He's got his thin and long blonde hair. Looks like a piece of garbage.
He's also jacked. He is in way better shape than he would ever be later in his career. Like, he might be like one of the top 5 most in shape people on the whole roster, which is crazy. He clearly has not discovered beer yet.
Yeah.
He's just got such a physical way of doing everything. Every move he participates in looks interesting. I've never seen anybody wrestle like that before.
Big Josh is Matt Bourne, a.k.a. Doink the Clown with a lumberjack gimmick.
Who is more tanked by their gimmick, Big Josh or Van Hammer? Discuss.
Big Josh, because Matt Bourne is actually good and Van Hammer sucks.
But at this point, Matt Bourne isn't actually good. It's not until he gets Doink that he's actually good.
He can wrestle. Like,
that's true.
Maniac Matt Bourne, he was a good mechanic, but like Van Hammer never turns out to be anything. They try with Van Hammer for years, and he just doesn't have it. He's got a great look. He's huge. He's got a good body, but
he is literally
with wrestling ability.
He's with WCW until 2000.
Yeah. Yeah, he was in Raven's Flock in the late 90s. They just never clicks, never find anything for him.
He's just a guy. This company never gets rid of anyone.
No.
Except Ric Flair on multiple occasions.
It's the dark irony that, this company never fires anybody except Ric Flair a bunch of times. Austin and Rude control Hammer at the beginning. They work really well together. They're tagging in and out. Big Josh tags in. He hits Rude in the stomach, but Rude doesn't sell it because his abs are so solid.
They make that canon, ladies and gentlemen, that Rick Rude's abs are so unbelievably tight that you cannot damage him in the chest.
It's like headbutting a Samoan. It's just not going to work.
I fucking love that.
Have you seen the Twitter account that's just clips of Rick Rude selling atomic drops?
No, but that sounds amazing.
Yes.
Because he sells atomic drops like he has explosive diarrhea right at that moment.
God, Rick Rude was a national treasure.
Again, a man capable of the highest of highs and the lowest of lows.
That's what I love. You just never knew what you were going to get. Just wild inconsistency from month to month.
Rick Rude plus Ultimate Warrior, 5-star classic. Rick Rude plus Masahiro Chono, -5 stars.
The faces fire up, knock the heels out to the floor. Josh gets hit with a cheap shot and then an axe handle from Rude. Josh gets worked over for the next couple minutes. Then he catches Austin with a scoop slam, but he misses an elbow drop. There's a hot tag to Van Hammer, who hits a suplex and a shoulder block. He makes the cover, but Rude breaks up the pin. Rude tags in. He hits the Rude Awakening, and they get the pin. Austin and Rude advance to the Battlebowl.
Weird to me that this is the second longest match in the whole thing, the one with Van Hammer in it.
They almost seem to have decided how long these matches should be at random.
Yeah,
not
they
much
really do.
Reason to it.
Except for the next one, which had to be short for obvious reasons we'll get to.
So we draw the next two teams. We've got Dustin Rhodes and Richard Morton. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
And then the most hilarious team of the night, Larry Zbyszko and El Gigante.
Okay, so now we have to discuss. They have this setup where they have like cameras in the babyface locker room and a camera in the heel locker room, but like they're such small, shitty like little windows because the split screen is so bad that you can't see what's going on in the locker rooms at all. So like this would be an amazing time to have a camera directly in Zbyszko's face as he learns that he's got a team with Gigante.
This had to be a rib on Zbyszko.
I hope that this one, like, we also don't know if the boys knew who their partners are going to be ahead of time. I'm going to guess not.
You think that, like, what? I mean, maybe they found out when they showed up to the arena that day?
Yeah, I'm going to guess that that's what happened. Though, like, I would love it if they just didn't tell Zbyszko at all. Like, don't worry about it, buddy. You'll see when you get out there.
Like, there's nobody funnier for Gigante to team with than Zbyszko, right?
Yeah, just the angriest, bitterest old man. Has to team with Gigante, and Zbyszko comes up to like his belly button. It's hilarious.
Yeah, just their interactions are hysterical as like Zbyszko is on the ring trying to coach him.
And see, again, this is the kind of thing that you can do with something like this. This would be like Otis and Dolph Ziggler having to team up, and Ziggler being like, "Man, come on, how do I even talk to this guy?"
Yeah. So, you know, Dustin is a babyface. Morton is a heel. Yes, they turned Ricky Morton heel. He's part of the York Foundation.
How do you not turn Robert Gibson heel? How do you choose the selling machine Ricky Morton? I don't know.
Gibson left the company, I believe. Gibson and Jim Cornette have bailed at this point.
I guess if you don't
Cornette's gone too. Then I'm thinking of Stan Lane and Cornette left together. But yeah, I believe Gibson is gone too.
Then why don't you just put Morton and Bobby Eaton together or something? Like, they're both just in purgatory.
Dustin and Morton had been a tag team before Morton turned heel. So that's another interesting dynamic.
It's just, Ricky Morton is in the Ricky Steamboat, like, camp of should have been a babyface forever, never should have turned heel. All of his skills are babyface skills.
I love how real the exasperation from Zbyszko feels here.
Yeah, even if he did know, there's some part of him, like, they did just saddle Zbyszko with making this work. Because El Gigante, I love El Gigante. I think it's a spectacle to see him. I think they could have done a lot more with him than they did. Like, he has limitations for days, but just seeing him standing on the ring apron is like, gets a pop out of me.
Yeah.
But, like, for Zbyszko, it's like, man, I got to be the one to call this fucking match with this guy.
Morton and Gigante both tag in. Morton, comes up to, Gigante's waist and immediately tags out to Dustin. Dustin Rhodes is, 6'5" or 6'6", and he's a foot shorter than Gigante.
And that's the thing. We've seen a lot of tall guys in wrestling. Gigante makes all of them look pathetic. He is by far the biggest.
Gigante is probably 6 inches taller than the Great Khali. And Khali's huge. Nuts. Like, Khali towers over The Undertaker. He was taller than the Big Show.
Like, Gigante is a fucking spectacle. You can see him towering over people from, the upper deck. That's how tall he is.
Yeah, I mean, the guy is, actually 7'5" or 7'6".
I still think he could have had a career of just, vote him in Battle Royals. He never loses. Give him the Andre treatment. You can't do shit with him.
Yeah, I felt like there was something there. He did have lots of health issues, unsurprisingly, given how enormous he was.
But he's also surprisingly athletic.
Yeah, he was a basketball and soccer player in Argentina.
Yeah, this motherfucker could move.
He was drafted by the Atlanta Hawks and turned out he was not good enough to play pro basketball, but Ted Turner, trying to get something out of his investment, suggested he could wrestle instead.
And he always seemed happy to be out there. He just had, a vibe about him where he was just, joyful, There's a baby face in there.
Gigante slams Morton. Dustin hits him with a drop kick. He doesn't sell it. Gigante tags out to Zbyszko. Shivani points out that it's not a legal tag because Zbyszko was standing up on the ropes, but he pretty much had to be able to reach. Zbyszko hits a neck breaker. Morton breaks up the pin. Dustin hits a hip toss, but Zbyszko blocks a bulldog. Zbyszko and Gigante get into it. Gigante shoves him, and Morton and Rhodes come in with a double drop kick, and they get the pin.
I love that finish for two reasons. One, I love the idea of two former partners who hate each other still doing their double team move.
They still remember how to do that, and it looked awesome. They hit it perfect.
I fucking love that. I also love that Gigante, this from the moment Zbyszko turns on, was like, I didn't really want to win this match anyway. Fuck y'all. Yeah. He just shoves him and wanders off as he's getting pinned.
Next up, we've got Jushin Thunder Liger and Bill Kazmaier against Diamond Dallas Page and Mike Graham.
This is the only match that I point to and say that this randomly pairing people can go so wrong. Like, this isn't actually random. Dusty chose all of these partnerships.
That's funny. That's an urban legend that, like, this was actually random, and of course it wasn't. Like, almost every match has a story.
Yeah, it almost may have been better if it was.
This one doesn't really... I mean, the story here is, like, Mike Graham is a great former junior heavyweight champion, and Liger is the new, great high flyer. They mesh horribly, because, like, Mike Graham is not used to taking any of these moves.
Yeah, junior heavyweight wrestling in the NWA in the 80s and what Jushin Thunder Liger is doing in the 90s are as different as what Lou Thesz does and what Roman Reigns does. Like, it's unfathomably different. And, like, there's really only, like, 3 people in this whole company who even know how to sell any of Liger's stuff. And, like, unfortunately, Sting's one. He's not going to get to work with him.
That would have been awesome, though.
Yeah, it would have. But, like, Bill Kazmaier?
Bill Kazmaier is a power lifter and, like, legitimately was one of the strongest men in the world.
This is very clearly meant to be, like, the biggest guy in the tournament and the smallest guy. Isn't that funny?
God, what if Gigante and Liger had been a team?
Now that kicks ass.
Yeah, that would have been unbeatable.
I love that all day. Liger just gets up on his shoulders and does a shooting star.
To put DDP in perspective, he's a rookie here, and he's already 35.
It is outrageous that he ever succeeded. Because
how many times must people have been like, just give it up, kid? Like, no reason to call him kid because he's older than most people around. But like, how many times people must have just been like, you are wasting your time. Like, you're never, like, you are too old to become a wrestler.
Let's put this fully in context. DDP did not start wrestling until after the age where Mick Foley retired.
Yeah.
That's it.
He's now 64, and he had a match this year in AEW. Believe it or not, that was the year 2020, all the way back in January, in the before times.
DDP is still in good enough shape that if he wanted, he could just wrestle. He's the most in-shape 64-year-old man alive.
And somehow Mike Graham is the worst part of this match.
Mike Graham looks like if your Uncle Mike put on some tights and hopped in the ring after a couple of beers.
He looks so... So Mike Graham was on, Starrcade 84, and he didn't look young then. And this is 7 years later. I don't know if he was still wrestling full-time at this point, or if it was like they needed some guys to fill the tournament out, and he was an agent, so they had dust off the tights in the booths.
Reading his wiki page, it literally just says, the whole listing for the 90s is, by 1990, Graham was an infrequent in-ring competitor.
Yeah.
So I guess that's that. So they literally put him in this because they thought he was the guy to sell for Liger, which is hilarious.
It's not good.
Page does a better job.
Kazmaier shows off his strength by tossing Graham across the ring. Liger gets in. He hits Graham with an enziguri. Liger hits a slingshot body press, and then he tags out to Kazmaier. Kazmaier hits a big clothesline on Page. Page tries to slam Kazmaier, but he can't get him up. He tags in Graham. Graham and Liger proceed to do some awkward pin-in combinations, just not clicking.
Yeah, this is just what Liger does, and he's trying to lead Graham through it, and Graham just can't do it. It's embarrassing.
Somehow this is the longest match on the show, other than the Battle Royal at the end.
I really do think that this was intended to be like a showcase for Liger.
Ugh.
But what winds up happening is it's a disaster, makes everyone look horrible.
Yeah, you know who the guy to pair him with is Pillman. They either had, I think it's probably this Super Brawl that's coming up a couple months after this. They have an amazing 5-star match at one of these Super Brawls. I can't remember if
it is this upcoming Super Brawl.
It's 92. Yeah, incredible match to open the show.
Basically, it creates cruiserweight wrestling in America. Like, it's that good. That is what this Jushin Liger at this point in his career, maybe one of the greatest wrestlers who ever lived, invented more moves than other wrestlers know how to do. And here he's teaming with Bill Kazmaier against Mike Graham. Also, what is it about Strongest Men Alive characters that they look so stupid? Like, what is it about him and, like, Ken Patera where they look like the biggest assholes?
The singlet and
this guy's got, like, a weight belt on and a big bald spot. And the fact that he's strong is nice, but you have to look cool. And he just doesn't.
Graham misses a charge into the corner. Liger does a somersault plancha out to the floor, but the camera misses it.
Of course.
Like, by far the biggest spot of the night, and the camera doesn't catch it.
Jeez.
Liger gets the pin after Kazmaier throws him onto Page. This was very long and very bad.
So bad.
We get a promo for Super Brawl 1992, and our next match, we've got Arn Anderson and Lex Luger against Terrence Taylor and the Z-Man.
Who is the most annoying person in this match? Is it Terrence Taylor or the Z-Man?
I might nominate Lex Luger.
That's fair.
Lex Luger in his neon yellow tights.
I like that pairing Luger and Anderson as a callback to the Four Horsemen.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's a badass team.
Yeah. Like, there's no question they're winning this match. Like, you could have ended it in a minute.
You can't beat those guys. Arn's ring savvy and Luger the ultimate powerhouse.
With Race on the outside, yeah, you got no fucking chance.
Luger is, of course, the reigning WCW champion. He's in this because the winner is not, guaranteed a shot at the title or anything like that.
Again, that could be, if there were... We come back to the fact that there are no stakes to this. All you get is the ring.
If you learn one thing from this podcast, let it be wrestling needs stakes.
Yeah, that's the difference between this and, like, the G1 Climax, where the champion's in that because they can choose their opponent if they win, which is a genuine prize.
Yeah, I love the idea that, like, Luger could win this and then he could be like, yeah, I want to wrestle Arachnaman at Super Brawl.
Yeah. Like, in the World Tag League this year... Taichi and Zack Sabre Jr. are like, yeah, if we win, we're just going to take the night off and go get drunk. Cool. Yeah. You can do that.
So one story running through the night here is Luger has put a bounty on Sting because he doesn't want to have to wrestle Sting. So he wants Sting to get taken out.
I love the idea of them just redoing. I love the idea of Harley Race being like, hey, you know what works? Bounties.
We can get my boys, the Briscoes. They'll tune them up good. No, Harley, that won't work anymore. The Briscoes are old.
They're old as shit, and they work for Vince. No.
So, obviously, Anderson and Luger are heels. Terrence Taylor is also a heel, so the Z-Man is the only babyface in the match.
Cool. I'm glad we have him to power it.
Luger hits Taylor with a press slam. Taylor tries for a sunset flip. He's able to connect, but Arn tags in and then kicks him in the face. Z-Man gets worked over by the heels for a while. Luger hits a big power slam. JR says that Luger was kicked out of the University of Miami for disciplinary reasons. I believe that is true, but it clashes with all the other times I've heard JR said that Luger, graduated with honors or whatever shit.
Well, that was when he was a babyface, Steve.
Yeah, exactly. When he's a babyface, he can't have gotten kicked out of Miami for trash in his hotel room.
The things you have to do in the late 80s, early 90s to get kicked out of the University of Miami.
That's the thing. It's like it
You'd
seems
have to
kind of
burn
insane.
the place down.
All he did, he trashed his hotel room because he was mad that he wasn't going to start a game.
Oh, really? Meanwhile, Michael Irvin is doing amount of cocaine high enough to see over the fucking sun with.
Yeah. Dubious. Yeah, so Luger left Miami and then went to play in the CFL. Got some tryouts in the NFL, but never caught on, and then played in the USFL, I believe with Ron Simmons on the Tampa Bay Bandits. And I believe Steve Spurrier was the head coach of the Tampa Bay Bandits, if I'm remembering correctly.
Wow, small world.
You can hear about that on our USFL episode.
God, can we do a USFL episode?
We really should.
Oh my God, that sounds so good.
Gut wrench powerbomb from Taylor. Arn breaks up the pin. Taylor gets Luger in a small package. He would have the pin, but the referee is distracted, putting Z-Man out of the ring. Arn gets a cheap shot on Taylor. Luger hits him with the attitude adjustment pile driver for the pin. That was a good match. That was the best match of the night to this point.
I feel like we've never mentioned the fact that his pile driver is called the attitude adjustment.
Yeah.
Who do you think it was that pitched that to Cena? Like, hey, you could just call it the attitude adjustment. It worked.
Might have been Arn Anderson, AA.
Yeah, it could have been Triple H. Could have been an Arn Anderson, but...
Yeah, one of the many WCW marks working for the WWF at that point.
I just love the thought of John Cena sitting in the locker room alone and being like, man, they told me I can't call it the FU anymore. What am I going to call my finishing move? And just Triple H descending out of the darkness. You know, in WCW, they had a move called the attitude adjustment.
This is just what Triple H lived for, getting as many references to like Jim Crockett promotions and WCW as possible. Triple H is going to be working for this company in 2 years.
Yeah, that's so funny.
It's Terra fucking Rising.
It's genuinely hilarious to me that he's the biggest NWA WCW fanboy who ever walked the earth, and yet when he got a chance to go to the company, he stayed there for a year and bounced immediately.
Yes. Because he said the old guys were never going to give up their spots.
And he was right.
Yeah, and glad he really learned that lesson from them. We get the drawing for the next match. So they draw Ricky Steamboat and Todd Champion is one pairing, and the other pairing is Cactus Jack and Buddy Lee Parker. As soon as Buddy Lee Parker is drawn, Abdullah the Butcher attacks him and beats the shit out of him. JR kind of hilariously points out that no one is helping Buddy Lee Parker in the locker room. They're all just watching him get his ass kicked.
This is the heel locker room, so all the heels are just kind of watching like, yep, well.
Sucks to suck.
The idea of this, JR tries to sell the idea that Abby is just confused. Like, he's like, no, but I'm Cactus's partner. So he comes down to the ring.
Yes. So Steamboat and Champion come out. They're both baby faces. They're totally cool together. Cactus comes out. Buddy Lee Parker is like in a coma back in the locker room, so he's not coming out. But Abdullah the Butcher does come out, but referees cut him off. They force him backstage, and in probably the single funniest moment on the show, right as Butcher is about to walk through the curtain, Buddy Lee Parker crawls through the curtain, so Butcher proceeds to beat him with his broom some more. He's just got like a mop, and he's just pummeling him with this thing.
My favorite part of all of this is that right as Buddy Lee Parker's name gets pulled, Jim Ross is like, oh, Buddy Lee Parker, one of the most underrated talents in all of WCW. And then he just gets his ass beaten for like 10 straight minutes.
Yeah. Immediately, Butcher grabs him and just slams him into the lockers.
It's so fucking funny.
Yeah. So we have essentially a handicap match. We've got Cactus by himself against Ricky Steamboat and Todd Champion. I would have loved a proper program between Cactus Jack and Ricky Steamboat.
We would have gotten something out of Steamboat that we've never gotten out of Steamboat in that. Like, it would have basically been like the Sting Cactus Jack program, just with Ricky in that place. That's
the thing is like the vicious, Steamboat having to tap into the vicious side of him. The scientific wrestling is not going to work against Cactus Jack.
Or like seeing Mick have to pull out some of his, like Mick could wrestle.
Yeah. That's the thing. That would have been, how fun would that be to see Cactus Jack doing chain wrestling?
Yeah, man.
Um, and it is kind of, they did that program with Steamboat in '92. I can't remember who did it. Somebody smashed his face, and like it was, I think he wanted to turn heel, and they ended up dropping this. But like he was doing this thing where he's like, my son won't even look at me. He can't even look at me without crying.
You're bringing out the Richard blood.
Yeah.
I would love the idea. Look, this is completely unsafe, and they shouldn't do it. But ever since I was a kid, I always wanted Ricky Steamboat to end a feud by like blowing fire in somebody's face.
What if
Cactus is that guy?
What if Richard Blood was his alternate persona?
Ooh, now we're talking about the three faces of Ricky Steamboat.
That's his great Muta to the Keiji Muto.
Fucking Rick Blood.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So Buddy Lee Parker spends this entire match trying to crawl to the ring. It's like a 5-minute match. He spends the whole time crawling to the ring, and then we should mention they're in the far ring for this one with the two rings set up. So he has to crawl through the other ring too.
He literally rolls into the ring and like claws his way across it to get to the corner.
Cactus is doing his best, but it's 2-on-1. Cactus gets thrown out to the floor, and Steamboat hits him with a suicide dive. Cactus Jack hits his signature, apron elbow drop on Champion. Cactus gets beat up. Parker finally makes it to the apron, and Cactus tags him in. Steamboat immediately hits Parker with a power slam and a flying body press. This was so funny. I loved this match.
Bless Buddy Lee Parker for being game enough to deal with literally being humiliated on live television.
What a good sport.
Yeah, you can never put this character on television again. He has been murdered.
And we've got another fun one coming up. They draw the pairings. We get Brian Pillman with Bobby Eaton. That is an awesome duo.
I love that.
Sting and Abdullah the Butcher.
See, this is my favorite match of the entire night because the dynamic is immediately bizarre and unlike any tag match I've ever seen.
Yeah, so they all start. So Butcher and Sting have been feuding because Abby is trying to collect the bounty that Luger put on Sting. During the entrances, they're fighting on the ramp. Abby hits Sting with the broom, and then Pillman runs in, and Abby's hitting him with the broom. Eaton cuts off Pillman, fights. The partners are fighting, and then Eaton attacks Sting. I just love the chaos of this breaking down.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating because once they get it in the ring, it's basically Sting and Pillman versus Eaton and Abby, but they're on opposite sides. So if Sting gets too close to his own partner, he's gonna get his ass kicked.
Yeah, and Pillman wants to win the match. He wants to get into the Battle Royal, but he's also he doesn't want to watch Sting get fucked over here. Sting's his buddy, so when Sting is getting double teamed, he's gonna jump in and help him.
And the priorities are fascinating because Pillman's got no beef with Eaton. Eaton has no beef with Pillman. So Pillman will run over and attack Abby, but leave Eaton alone because he still wants to win the match. He at least wants it to be fair, but he still wants to win. Yeah. And meanwhile, Sting's wrestling a 3-on-1 handicap match.
They get to the ring. Eaton works on Sting. Abby just hangs out down on the floor. He's not going to let Sting tag him in. Sting, this is, I guess I should have mentioned before, this is that ramp that connects directly to the ring. So we get to do the spot where Sting runs across the ring and does a flying clothesline over the ropes out onto the ramp.
Awesome. Just so awesome.
This ramp adds so much. We got to bring this thing back.
I mean, AEW basically does.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I love it every time.
Eaton retakes the advantage as Abby gets up on the apron. Abby's got a pencil from the announce table, so Eaton brings Sting over to the corner so that Abby can stab him with the pencil.
This is the best possible use of Abby at this point in his career.
Perfect.
He doesn't have to do anything really physical, but he's just a monstrous, just horrible person.
Yeah, he's stabbing Sting with a pencil. A pencil!
And like Abby, his whole career was able to get so much out of so little. Like the whole fork spot, like he never hurt a fly with the fork, but it's just so vicious looking to like stab somebody with something like
Oh,
a fork
yeah.
or a pencil. It's just like so mean.
But that's way safer than a chair shot.
Of course. Like you're not actually stabbing him with the pencil, but it's just like the idea of being stabbed with a pencil is so like vicious to people. That's getting the most out of the least, ladies and gentlemen. That's pro wrestling.
Pillman comes in with a drop kick on Abby. Sting uses a leverage move to throw Eaton out to the floor. Sting slams Abby. Pillman hits him with a splash. Eaton tries to tag in Pillman, and Pillman refuses. Eaton tries to tag in Abby, but of course the ref isn't going to let him do that.
JR gets so offended when he tries to tag in Abby. He's like, hey, wait a minute. You can't let him do that.
Nothing will make Jim Ross madder than not properly enforcing the rules of a tag match.
God damn it, he's not the right partner.
Where's my tag rope? Come on.
This entire match, his outrage at the situation Sting is put in does not even begin to compare to the outrage that I don't remember which one of these other matches it is, but somebody's not the legal man when they get pinned and he loses his shit.
Sting hits Eaton with a tombstone. Abby comes in to break up the pin, so he's breaking up the pin by his partner. Pillman fights with Abby as Sting hits a backdrop on Eaton. Now Cactus Jack shows up, and he's got Abby's broom, but he accidentally hits Abby with it. Sting hits Eaton with a flying body press and gets the pin. Excellent match. Loved this. This is like 5 minutes of pure joy.
Yeah, this is exactly the kind of stuff this kind of tournament should feature.
Yes.
This makes Sting look like $1 million. It's fascinating. It's interesting. Totally weird characters get interacted. You could span off into an Abdullah versus Brian Pillman thing after this.
Cactus and Abby get into it after the match. They brawl backstage. I don't know if anything actually came of that or if that was just kind of a one-off angle.
That's just how they say hi.
Punch each other in the head.
Yeah, because by the next pay-per-view, it's Ron Simmons versus Cactus Jack, so no, nothing comes of it.
Yeah. And I think that is one kind of shortcoming of this show, is it doesn't feel like anything that happened on this show really led to anything.
Yeah, technically, the winner of the Battlebowl does get a title shot, but it's by coincidence. It's not really...
No, that's the thing that's so crazy about it, is why not just make that the stakes here, since Sting is going to win anyway and get the title shot at the next pay-per-view.
It's amazing it took promoters until like 2000 to realize, oh, wait, maybe if we connect things like the Royal Rumble, people will like that. Yeah, no shit. The Royal Rumble would not be anything if it did not connect to WrestleMania.
That's the thing, is I wonder if the Royal Rumble would have survived if they hadn't come up with the WrestleMania title shot idea.
I mean, it would have still been an entertaining gimmick, but I'm not sure it certainly doesn't become anywhere near as meaningful.
I mean, Survivor Series became irrelevant and King of the Ring died because they didn't have stakes.
Yeah. They would have just been like, we don't need to keep like coming up, and the amount of work that goes into the Royal Rumble too.
It's got to take forever to lay that thing out.
Yeah, it would have been like, fuck it, we'll just give up on this. But with the WrestleMania main event slot, you've created something that literally is the most important thing you do all year. That match is more important than any other single match you have because of the stakes. You've got to have stakes.
It just doesn't seem complicated. I don't know why this has eluded wrestling bookers so frequently.
And maybe in the territory days is excusable because then, like, your shows didn't connect to your other shows.
It was just an attraction, and they really couldn't because it was harder. You didn't want to make it so dense that if somebody missed one episode of TV, they couldn't follow what was going on.
But like in 1991, you should already understand how this works.
Yeah, I think it's much better if this is on the Clash of the Champions and the winner is going to get the title shot at Starrcade.
Honestly, that's what frustrated me about Vince and the King of the Ring for so long. Is
So
that,
obvious.
like, dude, you already know the value of connecting a gimmick match
Yeah.
to a big show.
Have the
Just
winner
make it
get
the
the
main
title
event of
match at
SummerSlam.
SummerSlam. Yeah. And
You
they
did
did
it
that
one.
like 3 or 4. They did that several times. They did it with Owen Hart. They did it with Mabel. And then finally they did it with Brock Lesnar. And somehow that was the last King of the Ring
Yeah, they did it with
pay-per-view.
Lesnar, and it was a gigantic success.
And they never did King of the Ring. I mean, they dropped the King of the Ring tournament. It took them years to bring it back, and it's never been its own pay-per-view again, which is mind-boggling to me that at this point in this era, where pay-per-view buys don't matter anymore, they haven't brought back King of the Ring as its own show every year.
Yeah. Like, if you can do the Cruiserweight Classic, why can't you just do that same shit,
They
but with your
they
49 mid-carders?
they do it every couple years, but it's always at weird times, and yeah, they
Yeah.
don't make it its own special. And Baron Corbin won it the last time they did it.
Yeah. I guess that's the real point, is that it's always Baron Corbin.
All right, next match we've got Rick Steiner and the Diamond Stud, who is replaced by the Night Stalker. The Diamond Stud is Scott Hall, but he's apparently injured. He's replaced by the Night Stalker. And the other pairing is Vader and Curtis Hughes.
First of all, the Night Stalker is Brian Clark, who was
Yeah!
Adam Bomb and Wrath and did a lot of cool stuff other times. And he looks great here. Why the fuck is he called the Night Stalker?
I have no idea.
Does
Why?
he have a rapist gimmick? Is that
Yeah.
what we're doing?
Why do wrestling bookers love the idea of someone being a stalker? Barry Windham was the stalker later on.
At Halloween Havoc, the month before, the couple months before, he was a masked ghoul called the Night Stalker. But then they unmasked him, and he just looks like a guy here who happens to be called the Night Stalker.
JR says that he played football at Florida State.
I can't confirm that.
I tried. Can't find any documentation on that. It seems strange that that is like not something that ever comes up again later in his career. Curtis Hughes did in fact play at Kansas State, and Vader played for the LA Rams. So lots of football players in this match.
Kind of seems like they should have put Ron Simmons in this one, huh?
Yeah, that would have been all players. I mean, Rick Steiner was a very good wrestler at Michigan.
But he was not a football player. The sheer size of this match, it's very funny to watch a match where Rick Steiner is like the cruiserweight.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
No mask for Vader. Does he not have the mask as part of his gimmick yet?
No, that comes later.
Yeah.
That's just a plain Vader thing. Big Van Vader didn't wear a mask.
Vader gets knocked to the floor by a Steiner line. He grabs Steiner and runs him into the post. Steiner manages to suplex Vader from the apron into the ring, which is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, it's fucking cool. Rick Steiner's cool.
Yeah. Vader hits a splash on Night Stalker after Rick has just hit the Steiner Bulldog on Curtis Hughes. They both make the cover, but Vader and Night Stalker are the legal men, so the heels get the win and they advance.
Yes, that's the one. There are some matches that, like, they didn't necessarily make sense when they were happening, but they're so frustrating when we look back at them like this. Like, how much would you have liked to see Vader face Rick Steiner in a singles match?
Sounds awesome.
Vader versus Scott Steiner. Like,
yeah, and after he beats up Rick, then Scott can come out to make the save, and we get the match we really want to see.
You can get like 2 pay-per-views out of that shit. Like, that could have been, if we had literally had Vader squashing all the baby faces all the way to the top, we would have eventually gotten to stuff like that. Vader versus Ricky Steamboat. Like, that just sounds cool as shit. Vader versus Jushin Liger.
Next, we've got Scott Steiner and Firebreaker Chip against Johnny B. Bad and Arachnaman. So we got 4 baby faces here. Firebreaker Chip is just kind of a generic All-American type of guy. He's announced as being from WCW Special Forces.
That's correct.
I assume they were trying to do like a tie-in animated series or comic book series or something there.
Yes, that's actually one of the things that Bischoff got hired because he was promoting. Is that like along with some like board games and stuff like that was Bischoff's main job, is to sell like Turner on like various other products and brands.
Yeah, not the
So
worst idea I've ever heard.
the name Firebreaker Chip is
Yes, that is a terrible idea, and he's not a very good wrestler. Arachnaman is Brad Armstrong with a Spider-Man ripoff gimmick. I believe Marvel, shortly after this, Marvel Comics will send WCW a cease and desist letter, and they will drop this gimmick because it's obvious trademark infringement.
what trademark infringement on what? He's an Arachnaman.
His suit is yellow and blue instead of red and blue.
I
This gimmick. And like, why Brad Armstrong? Why not a high flyer?
Let me be clear too. This is not the only time that Brad Armstrong almost got them sued for a character he was doing, because he had previously been a character named Fantasia, who was the third member of the Freebirds, and Disney was going to sue them.
Stop doing this.
What are you doing? Before that, he was a character called the Candyman.
Oh God, was he some kind of pedophile?
I have to assume.
That was a Jim Herd thing. He was like, yeah, he'll come out throwing candy to the kids. They'll love it.
Just imagine you're him, and you're like, all right, you don't have to be the Candyman anymore. Yes, now you're Fantasia. Well, actually, they sued. You can't be Fantasia anymore. Oh, thank God. Now you're Arachnaman.
Oh my God.
It's just so awesome.
I mean, the only good thing about this match is Scott Steiner gets to throw smaller guys around.
No, the only good thing about this match is every time Scott Steiner's on the apron, he's just yelling, "Come on, Chip! Get him, Chip!"
Steiner hits a spine buster and a gut wrench slam on Johnny B. Bad. He hits a tiger bomb on Johnny B. Bad. There's basically no offense for Bad and Arachnaman. Firebreaker Chip locks in a Boston Crab. Arachnaman and Chip both run the ropes. Chip like stops and tags out, and Arachnaman just keeps running the ropes like he's stuck in a loop.
And he just runs right into a giant belly to belly from Steiner.
Yeah. Steiner murders him with a Steiner line, then a tilt-a-whirl slam, and then like Arachnaman goes up to the second rope, he jumps off, and Scott catches him with a belly-to-belly suplex and pins him. At least Scott Steiner got to do awesome stuff here.
Scott Steiner had such open contempt for all three of the other people in this match with him.
I wish he had broken out the push-ups here.
Oh my God. The fact that he had to be a babyface was the only thing holding him back.
Next, we've got Ron Simmons and Thomas Rich against Steve Armstrong and PN News. Thankfully, this is finally the last tag match, and we're down to just kind of the last four guys. There's no real story or anything interesting here.
Yeah, unlike other people who may have promoted this in such a way so the last match is the most interesting, this has all the stink of just get it over with. We got to get Ron in the main event, so come on.
This is a bathroom break match before the main event. Let the fans go, they can go get some popcorn, they can go buy a t-shirt, like get a hot dog and come back down and be ready to see the main event.
Exactly like the match before. This is just Ron Simmons eating the other three alive.
Yeah, Simmons throwing PN News around is impressive because he's like 350 pounds.
Also, Simmons is super over.
Yeah.
Like, that gets lost a lot. Like, Ron Simmons has such a weird career because it's kind of over in a weird way before it ever really gets started. And, like, it seems like he could have done a lot more as a babyface in this company.
Yeah. But you understand why Bill Watts saw so much in him and threw the world title on him before he was ready.
Yeah. They hot shot it to him way before he's ready. He barely so much as sniffs it for the entire remainder of his career. That kind of sucks. But, I mean, ultimately, he's happy with the career that he has. So, I mean, it's not like he's not a legend and everything. It's just a bummer that, like, our first Black World Champion doesn't get more.
Rich gets his knees up on a splash, but he doesn't take the opportunity to tag out. Rich goes back to getting worked over. Rich finally manages to tag out to Simmons. Simmons hits a power slam on Armstrong, scoop slam on PN News, spine buster on Armstrong, and he gets the pin. So Simmons and Tommy Rich advance to the Battlebowl, and that is all that's left on the show. We are down to, this is a 20-man, 2-ring battle royal. The way this works, everybody starts in one ring, so all 20 guys in one ring. You have to throw people into the second ring, and then whoever is the last guy in the first ring gets to wait until the second ring clears out, and then those two guys are going to fight each other.
This is confusing because, again, they do this weird split screen thing where there's a ton of space in between the two camera angles, and you can't really see shit that's going on in either one.
Yeah, the multiple ring thing, this feels like something that's going to come back at some point here. It could work today because now people have 50-inch high-definition TVs, and you could actually see what was going on. Here, you have no idea what's going on, because when they go to the split screen, like, the graphics take up, like, more than half the screen, and it's so grainy you can't see what's happening.
The other problem is that nowadays, all of the announcers have, like, tablets where they can watch what we're seeing in order to call it. They don't actually have to be looking at the ring. JR and Tony Schiavone are literally right underneath the ring. So when stuff's going on the other side, they don't see it. So there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get called. Like, there are several eliminations that JR announces like 3 minutes later.
So the participants, we've got Abdullah the Butcher, Arn Anderson, Steve Austin, Marcus Bagwell, Todd Champion, Firebreaker Chip, Jimmy Garvin, Curtis Hughes, Bill Kazmaier, Jushin Liger, Lex Luger, Richard Morton, Dustin Rhodes, Thomas Rich, Rick Rude, Sting, Scott Steiner, Ron Simmons, and Vader. Don't ever let anybody tell you that WCW didn't have talent in this era, because they definitely did, if you heard those names.
Again, this just backs up your point that if they had only made this like a 20-person tournament and not a 40-person tournament, the names would have been fucking awesome.
Yes, like 15 of these guys rule.
And 5 of them are interesting.
Yeah.
And then there you go. But there are 20 shitty people here.
They don't get entrances. They just come out in a line and they're announced. So, I mean, you don't have time for 20 entrances anyway.
True.
Vader goes right after Sting, foreshadowing their feud, which is to come in 1992. Kazmaier is dumped over the top, but not into the second ring, so he's not eliminated. I have a thought here. Would it have made sense if, like, all the Dangerous Alliance guys immediately jumped into the second ring and then they could just run that ring?
Oh, God, yes. And then every time anybody got thrown in there, they just throw them out.
Yeah.
Until it was just their guy. And then at the end, they all just jump out and it's Rude versus Sting.
Or what if Sting gets ganged up on and he almost immediately gets thrown into ring 2? And then our story is just what Sting has to fight through. Sting has to fight through everybody in ring 2.
That would have been fantastic. And then literally it's just one by one, all of Sting's biggest enemies get thrown in there with him. He's got to fight Rude. He's got to fight Austin. He's got to fight Luger. He's got to fight Vader. Because this whole promotion, this whole show is built on the idea that Sting is feuding with everyone on the entire roster.
Vader drags Steamboat out onto the ramp, slams him, but he misses a splash. Vader throws Steamboat out onto the ramp again. This was generally the most interesting part of this match, was when guys would go out and fight on the ramp.
I love that Vader was so smart. He's just like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to fight over here. I can't get eliminated, so deal with it.
Just sat down on the ramp.
Come and get me, motherfucker. The match doesn't end until I get back in the ring.
Rich is the first guy to get thrown over into the second ring, which really just gives him time to rest. It's not that bad a deal.
Yeah. luckily the announcers do make a big deal out of that. Like, what a great advantage to be the
Yeah.
first guy over there.
I think I might have enjoyed this more if it had been 10 guys in both rings.
If they had just started in each ring, yes, that would have made much more sense.
And then you fight, and you can have guys get thrown from one ring to another, but it just comes down to the last two guys, one guy in each ring, and then they're going to fight each other.
And then you do that wonderful thing where like Sting and Luger both throw their guy over the top at the same time, and then they go like back to back on the ropes.
Yeah.
And they just look at each other, and then Sting comes charging and jumps over both rings or whatever.
Sting starts firing up on Luger, but we can't even see it. We just hear the announcers calling it.
Yep.
Bagwell gets thrown into ring 2. Hughes throws Firebreaker Chip into ring 2. Liger gets thrown into the second ring, and Morton just kind of follows him. Who knows?
Yes, he does.
What does it matter?
Liger, there's a period where there's like 10 guys just standing in the middle in between the two rings. Like, are we supposed to go yet? Or no? All right. Well,
the other thing is, like, at first they're like, oh, they actually have to get like thrown into the second ring, but that doesn't happen to anybody. They all just kind of like go over the ropes and then like climb into ring 2.
Yep.
Liger and Morton both go over the top on a clothesline. They're both eliminated. Simmons throws Hughes into the second ring. Vader beats up Dustin Rhodes on the floor. Rich gets eliminated. The camera misses it. Garvin gets eliminated. Didn't see how it happened. Sting and Rude start fighting. They both tumble over the top into the second ring. And then we're down to Luger and Vader in ring 1. I think that's WCW champion versus IWGP champion.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Vader's not acknowledged as the IWGP champion, and there's not really much reason for him to be.
Actually, he may have dropped it to Choshu already, because at the Supercard...
Yeah, Choshu's the champion on that. Yeah, Choshu's the champion by January 4th, so that would be a pretty narrow period of time in between shows here.
Yeah, so he would have probably just dropped it right before coming here full time, I would imagine.
Luger clotheslines Vader into ring 2, and Luger is the last man standing in the first ring. Abdullah and Kazmaier are both eliminated. Sting drop kicks Arn out to the floor. Dustin gets dumped. Hughes and Simmons both go over the top. Vader gets eliminated by a clothesline from Sting and Steamboat. Scott Steiner gets eliminated. I missed how it happened. And we're down to 4 in ring 2. We've got Sting, Austin, Rude, and Steamboat. So basically, we've got 2 heels against 2 baby faces, but Rude accidentally knocks Austin over the top. Rude throws Steamboat over. Steamboat skins the cat back in and eliminates Rude with a head scissor. Steamboat goes to pull himself back in, but Rude, grabs him and pulls him off the apron to eliminate him. And then Rude jumps in the ring and hits a Rude Awakening on Sting for good measure.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Down to just Sting and Luger. Luger's had like 5 minutes to rest. Sting has gotten the shit kicked out of him, just took Rude's finisher. Luger dominates Sting, who is completely exhausted. They fight out on the ramp. Sting grabs Harley Race and slams him. Luger knocks him off the ramp into the railing. No one's eliminated because nobody went over the top rope here. Sting fires up. He fights back. He goes for the Stinger Splash, but he misses. He's hanging halfway over the top, but Luger is too tired to take the advantage. Sting then hits a Famouser, a move I have never seen him use before or since.
I really love seeing the way he did it too. Like he came like running into it, so it's like a bulldog with his legs. Like this move kicks ass. Like this is such a great Sting move.
He then hits a clothesline and dumps Luger over the top rope. Sting is the winner of the Battlebowl. Congratulations, Sting.
I wish he had sold being like exhausted more, because like he went through hell to win this Battlebowl.
He did.
Like he's feuding with everyone who was in it, and he still managed to win. Like this is some Super Cena shit.
Against all odds, outlasted everybody here.
And the fans are so happy.
Yeah.
Like this is one of the few like happy. That's what I'm gonna say too. Like the fact that people hold against this show that it happened kind of sucks because I guarantee you the fans who were there went home happy.
Oh
Like
yeah.
the main event ends just the way it should. Sting is built great. It feels epic. It sets up future feuds between him and Vader and him and Luger and him and Rude. Like even though it is a weird gimmick, it's a success. It worked.
Yeah. And like, I mean, Sting is what they've got. They're right to ride him. This is now 3 straight Starrcades he's won the main event of. Like, no question who the man in WCW is at this point.
I did love at one point. I think like the US champion, the world champion, and like Vader who had just been IWGP champion or whatever, and it's just like and Sting, who's probably the people's champion because he won that shit like 2 years earlier.
Yeah. We go to Shivani and Ross. They wrap it up, and then we go to the credits, and that's a wrap for Starrcade 1991. I mean, this is not a good show by any means, but if you're looking for something a little different to watch, not the worst 3 hours of your time. Like, you just want to get a feel for like what was weird and good and bad about early 90s WCW, this will do it for you. You get to see the whole roster here.
I just want you guys to know that like as when we found out that we were doing the show, I was like rubbing my hands together and twisting my mustache in an evil way, prepared to like absolutely bury this show 6 feet under into a nuclear crater. But I can't. Like it was a success. It was pretty fun to watch. Like it's so novel to see something like this. Like I'm with you. I absolutely wish they would do something like this again.
So we continue our Starrcade anthem. I mean, where would you rank this among these Starrcades we've done? Was this better? I think this was a better show than the previous year with the Black Scorpion in the tag tournament, I think.
I'm going to go so far as to say that we've covered how many of the Starrcades now? Like at least 10 of them, all told.
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. I would go so far as to say there's only been one good Starrcade of all the Starrcades we've ever covered, and it's the first one. So this one's in the top half. Honestly, yeah. I enjoyed it. It didn't have a completely anticlimactic ending.
Man, it's so sad. The legacy of Starrcade is just not what it should have been.
No. I mean, like, there are some decent Starrcades that we haven't covered yet, or at least some decent main events to Starrcade. There's one in particular we're going to get to not until next year, but Flair versus Vader is something that I'm salivating for.
Yeah, I think we are going to get that in this year.
Are we? Oh, fuck yeah, yes.
That's 93. That's only 2 weeks away.
Yes.
Yeah. You'll be able to. That's going to be, I believe, Christmas Day, actually.
Merry goddamn Christmas.
Yeah. We've got Flair versus Vader.
Fuck. Thank God.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny. This is just so infamous as like one of the WCW debacles. I really don't think this was that bad.
No, they list this up there with like the Ding Dongs and stuff like that.
The Chamber of Horrors.
The Shockmaster. And like, no, this isn't that at all.
Like, this is a good concept that they didn't execute very well.
Again, Dusty Rhodes was always ahead of his time in a number of ways. This is an incredibly inventive, interesting thing that I would have tuned in and paid money to see what the hell it was. It could have been done a hell of a lot better, and especially any wrestling company. I implore you, every major wrestling company today has more top to bottom talent than like WCW had at this point, probably. Any of you do this. All of you do this. All of you team up and do this.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing I'll say is just like, I don't want to knock a company for trying like an original concept, because we could really use some things to break the monotony of pro wrestling at any given time. I mean,
Dusty Rhodes
something that's not another fucking cinematic match, because I never need to see another one of those as long as I live.
Yeah, Dusty Rhodes' WCW is like, it lives in an alternate universe from what WWE is now. WWE now is like the least creative wrestling can possibly be. And this is just like he had a fever dream and made it come alive.
Yeah. All right, so that's a wrap for Starrcade 1991. What have we got in store for the people next week?
Oh, boy.
Another Battle Bowl.
The only other one they ever made.
Not true. It became its own pay-per-view in 1993.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I think we're now going to have to cover this.
Hell yeah. I fucking love Battle Bowls.
So we've got another Battle Bowl next week. This one also has an NWA World Title match between Masa Chono and the Great Muta.
Hell yes.
That could be amazing or a disaster, and there's really no in between, I feel like.
But this is when those two are coming into their own as like the two biggest stars in all of Japanese wrestling. So that's a huge deal. You got like a world title match between Ron Simmons and Dr. Death.
Yeah, that's a Jim Ross special if I've ever seen one.
Shane Douglas and Ricky Steamboat versus Barry Windham and Brian Pillman sounds good.
The tag belts. And then Sting versus Vader in the finals of the King of Cable tournament.
Sting versus Vader. And we're going to crown a Battle Bowl 2 champion that nobody is going to see coming.
Yeah. So yeah, this should be an interesting one. All that and more next time on the Lawcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next time.